Good evening, I'm Ces Oreña-Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
The big stories tonight. It's now a waiting game as the two houses of Congress toss the proverbial ball around when it comes to Vice President Duterte's trial. Now the House of Representatives is seeking clarification from the Senate after it remanded the articles of impeachment to the lower chamber.
At this point, though, the Senate has no clarity to offer the House, but it does reiterate jurisdiction over the Vice President's ouster case, vowing to see the trial through the new 20th Congress.
And that standoff in Congress is a small legal victory for Vice President Sara Duterte, at least for now. But on the periphery, her legal battles could mount yet after the House recommends charges against her over alleged funds misuse.
Wala sa lugar para sa akin ang Kamara na hindi sumunod sa ipinag-uutos ng impeachment court.
We do not defy. We do not disobey. We are merely deferring receipt of the same to give way to the clarification of all these issues.
And just like those following the Senate's moves the past few days, House prosecutors were puzzled why the articles of impeachment were returned to them. Today, June 11, these lawmakers were supposed to present the charges against Vice President Sara Duterte. But as we all know, that didn't happen after the upper chamber made a surprise decision. Marian Enriquez has tonight's big story.
In response to the Senate, House prosecutors maintained that the impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte had strictly complied with the Constitution. Batangas 2nd District Representative Jervil Luistro said the prosecution panel is confused with the Senate's order to remand the case back to the lower house and that they would seek further clarification.
Ang prosecution panel po ay nalalabuan dito sa naging order ng impeachment court kagabi. So we resolve to seek the clarification of the impeachment court.
Last night, the Senate voted to return the case to the lower house and have it certified that it did not violate the Constitution. Before the final complaint that ultimately went to a vote, there were 3 other impeachment complaints that were filed against Duterte. The Constitution bars subjecting any official to multiple impeachment proceedings within the same year.
With respect to the first order about the certification pertaining to our compliance with the Constitution in filing the impeachment complaint, we maintain our position. Sumunod po kami fully and strictly to the requirements of the Constitution. We did not violate the 1-year prohibition rule.
For House Prosecutor Joel Chua, the Senate's vote to remand the impeachment complaint to the House is what's illegal.
Nakakalungkot dahil maliwanag naman po sa rules on impeachment na sila rin mismo ang gumawa na dapat sila ay aakto na impartial o neutral. Pero ngayon po parang hinaharang po nila ang demokrasya po dito sa ating bansa.
Incoming Akbayan Party List Representative Shell Jokno also questioned the legality of the Senate's move. Jokno pointed out that the senators were no longer lawmakers when they moved to remand the case as they already took their oath as judges. This prompted his observation that the senators committed a clear grave abuse of discretion.
Well, yun na nga yung pinagtatakahan namin na kung pwede ba mag-file ng motion ang isang judge. I think the ball should be thrown back to the Senate, and the Senate should be, we should call on the Senate to conduct the trial as the Constitution commands.
With regards to the other issue raised by the Senate, Luistro said they cannot respond to this because the 20th Congress has not yet convened, with lawmakers only starting their office by June 30.
With respect to the second order, it is impossible to be complied with because, first of all, 20th Congress doesn't exist yet.
For News 5, I'm Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
Senate President Cheese Escudero is not blinking, and neither is he passing on jurisdiction over Vice President Sara Duterte's trial. Now, the presiding officer of the impeachment court, Escudero, says the return of complaints against Duterte to the lower chamber does not mean the Senate is done with the case. Escudero said proof of this is their issuance of summons related to the impeachment starting today, particularly the one for the vice president, which instructs her to answer to the 7 articles of impeachment within a non-extendable period of 10 days. She also has to face a Senate tribunal on the date and time set by the presiding officer.
Panawagan ko dun sa 5 kasamahan naming dakdak pa rin ang dakdak sa dismissal. Nakalagay doon without dismissing, without terminating. So, the impeachment court retains its jurisdiction. To my mind, that's why we issued summons. How can we issue summons if we do not have jurisdiction? So, walang naaksayang panahon dahil nagawa namin lahat ng tinakdang gawin.
Well, another order the Senate Impeachment Court issued is for the lower chamber to release an attestation that they have actually followed the constitutional mandate limiting verified impeachment complaints to only 1 within the year. They do not have a deadline, but Escudero says Congress is duty-bound to obey.
Hindi kami magkapantay pagdating sa bagay na ito. Hindi ito House at Senate kung saan co-equal ang mga ahensyang yan. Wala sa lugar para sa akin ang Kamara na hindi sumunod sa ipinag-uutos ng impeachment court.
Escudero also insists that they save the 20th Congress time and resources by making sure the House prosecution has already answered queries before holding trial. He also defended the impeachment court's order to the incoming Congress to attest that they will be picking up from where they left off in the 19th Congress.
May basihan at karapatan ng Senado. Tanungin ang papasok na Kongreso. Gusto pa ba nyo at interesado pa ba kayo dahil yung gumawa nito ay yung nagdaang Kongreso? And again, the 19th House cannot bind the 20th House. Ang paghalal ng panel of prosecutors para sa akin ay hudyat o senyal na interesado pa rin sila na ipursige ang impeachment complaint na ito.
As a parting shot, Escudero says whoever has questions on the Senate's procedures could always go to the Supreme Court for answers.
The Senate believes it is standing on solid legal ground, but experts are not so sure about that. For one, former Supreme Court spokesperson Attorney Ted Te is questioning the constitutionality of the return of impeachment articles. Here he is speaking to our sister program Storycon earlier today.
The Constitution defines the power that is given to the Senate and the House in relation to impeachment. It is not supposed to act like the regular court. Wala nakalagay sa Constitution that the Senate can, as acting as an impeachment tribunal, can remand, no? And in fact, it should not. I disagree with the Senate President's characterization that hindi equal, no? Because again, the constitutional dynamics here for impeachment, no, are laid out not in the legislative section of the Constitution, but in the accountability section, no? Dinefine ng malinaw ng Constitution. Ang gagawin ng House ay they will constitute themselves as a prosecution panel. They present the evidence because they made the decision to impeach. In that sense, masusunod yung Senate acting as an impeachment tribunal. But I do not think it is reflective of a sudden shift in terms of importance. Hindi ibig sabihin nun less equal yung House impeachment panel.
Now regarding the House's move to seek clarification on the remand, Te says it's a prudent step.
The rules of impeachment adopted by the Senate, it is only upon presentation of the articles of impeachment that someone should be sent. So, saan yun? Saan nakabase yun? The House Prosecution Panel is, I think, acting prudently by asking clarification. Mahirap maintindihan dahil ang giya natin dito ay yung Constitution, no? At ang nag-implement nung constitutional dynamics dito, no, ay yung rules of impeachment of the Senate, right, as acting as an impeachment tribunal.
Meantime, is there any legal recourse for ordinary Filipinos to help move things along, whether it be forward or backward when it comes to Duterte's impeachment trial? Here's what Attorney Te has to say.
Statements have been written. Almost everyone has chimed in. Those statements have actually moved the Senate, right? From a position na hindi kami gagalaw to taking the oath as an impeachment tribunal. Merong nangyayari mga protesta sa labas. No, I think that is a legal recourse. No, that is something that is guaranteed to us by the Constitution. If we're talking about litigation, sometimes filing of cases might not be the best solution. Dahil minsan pag inangat mo na sa korte, wala ka na masyadong magawa. People are doing what they can to make their voices heard. The people are already telling the senators acting as members of the impeachment tribunal na hindi ito ordinaryo, no, ordinaryong sitwasyon.
We again weigh in on the legal back and forth that has hounded the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte. And joining us tonight is UP College of Law Assistant Professor Paulo Tamase. Good evening to you, Prof. And there's nothing that will interrupt our conversation tonight. Well, the House panel has said that, well, they want to see the silver lining in that. At least summons were sent to the Vice President to answer. But on the other hand, there is no complaint because it was remanded to them. How do we figure this out?
Exactly. So good evening to everyone. If the lack of clarity of where we are really comes from the initial premise where what the Senate did is unconstitutional. There is no basis in the Constitution for this. There is no basis in the Senate's own rules and past practices for it. And so it already happened. We're in this space where we're trying to navigate the possible next steps for all of the parties. Now, on the part, I think, of the House, right, that silver lining is really based on, I think, the promise that there was summons issued today, and therefore we're expecting an answer from the Vice President in 10 days. That also means that there will be a response from the House 5 days from their receipt of that answer. But that's as far as what we know now, right? The rules, unfortunately, aren't very clear.
The House is seeking clarification for this remand, but the Senate wants an attestation from them. So should they give that or seek clarification first before responding?
So I think that legally, right, the House prosecutors are under the jurisdiction of the Senate in the sense that they're the ones who are presenting the case. And therefore, if we're trying to apply analogously rules of how we lawyers appear in courts, they have a duty to help the court achieve the ultimate purpose, which is to find the truth in the allegations that are being brought before it.
So is it your position that do you share the position of Senate President Chis Escudero that they are not co-equal branches in this particular case, but they are the impeachment court, and so they can order the House?
Yeah, that has to be contested, I think, and challenged. It might be true that the Senate would have some ability to order the House panel to comply, right? The lawyers representing the House to comply. But impeachment does not change the fundamental structural relationship between the Senate and the House. We call the Senate often the upper house and the House of Representatives the lower house. Constitutionally, they're equal, right? They have the same prerogatives. They don't interfere in each other's processes. And I think that was what was disturbing with the order that came out today, with formalizing the approval of the motion last night. If you look at the second page of that order, where the Senate discusses the order that it gave to the House, it orders not the panel of prosecutors to produce a resolution, it orders the House itself, and not just the House, but the House that has not yet even convened, to issue a resolution confirming its willingness. And that really, it's a very fine legal point, but it sort of already intervenes with the inner workings of the next Congress as to how they want to express their continued interest. So there's a problem with that, and I don't think the impeachment court or the Senate assuming its special role and constitutional role as an impeachment court would necessarily mean that it suddenly is now superior to the House, right? Even in this impeachment context.
Attorney Tamase, how is that different from a crossover, right? So let's assume natuloy yung original plan and then today binasa na yung articles, yung presentation ng House prosecutor panels. But, next month in July, wala na, iba na rin yung Congress eh. How is that a different case in terms of continuity? And as opposed to now na pinapa-attest nilang 20th Congress na hindi pa nga nagyayari. Where we're assuming the 20th Congress will continue it, hindi pa rin naman sila nako-convene.
Right. There's a legal difference and there's a practical difference. Right? I'll go with the legal difference first. The first is that the Constitution provides for a very clear structure of how impeachment is done. We do it at the House level first, and then we do it at the Senate. There is no suggestion in the text of the Constitution, in the practice of the Senate here, in the practice of the Senate in the US, about this idea of one House returning a complaint to another side, right? That messes up our understanding of where we are exactly in the impeachment stage. Are we still trying to investigate principally or preliminarily the vice president for these impeachable acts, or are we already looking for or assessing the evidence in a way that would result in a possible acquittal or conviction? Right? So it messes up the procedure, and that procedure is very important in a highly politically charged context like impeachment, because it's one of the assurances to the public that this process is undergoing strict constitutional observance. So there's a legal reason for it. There's also a practical reason for it. It sets a very bad precedent for the future in how a Senate that may find it politically inconvenient, for example, to decisively rule that we should continue with impeachment, it will just pass on that question back to the House. And then the House will be forced to pass the question back to the Senate. So we already had a 4-month delay from February, another 2 weeks in June. Now you have another 6-7 weeks until the opening of the next Congress, which is the cleanest date when it can start. When do we start? When do we start the impeachment trial? So while it might have the same practical effect, the long-term consequences and the legal consequences are serious and undermine not just impeachment as an accountability mechanism. It undermines the Senate's role as an cog, an important cog in the whole accountability mechanism in our constitutional government.
Okay, I want to circle back to what you said earlier that all these things that happened last night, they were not actually kumbaga, hindi siya talagang malinaw sa Constitution. It's not part of the process, but we also heard former Justice Adolfo Ascuna, who wrote Article 11, he actually sort of sees the kumbaga, common sense in all of this, right? And he explained himself. But if there is no real kumbaga, instructions on how we do it, there's also really no clear instructions on what not to do, right?
That's true.
And that's why everyone is arguing right now. So I suppose I just want to ask what the position of UP Laws is. Is the law school taking a position on this?
We haven't really met yet, even as a smaller faculty of constitutional law professors, to discuss this. But we were discussing a bit with some colleagues this morning when it happened. So a few things, right? I'll try to keep them as brief as possible. The first is, I don't think it's necessarily correct that the Constitution isn't clear on the point. It's clear at least on the point that this remand isn't in the Constitution, right? It's also not in the Senate rules. So the remand is not something that was available in the first place. On the second point, on Justice Ascuna's point, I think I understand the practical reasons he was stating. And of course, as a framer of the Constitution, he has a very important role in trying to help us understand it. But the primary way we understand the Constitution in Philippine interpretation is not the views of just one framer, not even the views of the entire chamber. It's what the text says, what the spirit of the text is, and what the larger context of the constitutional text is. How do we make the Constitution work as a whole? That brings me to my third point, which is emphasizing what the law faculty has said last week on how we try to understand these difficult provisions in the Constitution. A good guiding star would be what would be a proper reading of the Constitution that would further accountability. And at least from our perspective, and I think the perspective of many other people who have been looking at this very closely, delaying the trial again, or effectively, and punting a difficult political question to another branch that has already done its job, right? We can say imperfectly, but still has done its job. That doesn't really further us in the accountability process. It doesn't make us closer to knowing what really happened, right? Or whether the accusations against Vice President Duterte are really true. So it doesn't move us closer to the constitutional principle of accountability.
Okay, so Attorney Will, one of the purposes of remanding the impeachment complaint to the House is for them to prove that they followed procedure, it was constitutional. But it's quite interesting because it's not like, are you expecting a different answer from House, right, to confess that they did not follow procedure? So by that, can you also share your opinion on whether the complaint really followed the one-year rule? Did it violate it? And if not, is this just a deliberate delay on the part of the Senate?
So I'll say for now that I think I don't have enough facts with me, right, to understand really whether the one-year bar rule was violated. There might be preliminary review. I don't want to soil the discussion that's happening between the two houses now by providing something that's not founded on facts that I actually know. But on that point, I think one thing that to highlight is that when the House passes a normal bill, let's say a bill for legislation, and moves it to the next, right, or to the Senate doesn't question whether enough people in the House voted for it. The Senate doesn't look into the records of the House and their journal on whether there was compliance with the constitutional procedure. It accepts it as a matter of respect for the other branch. And I don't understand how impeachment, which is subject to the same constitutional rules, right, why that rule of respect wouldn't apply here. And so it's certainly problematic because I think it also pits the House versus the Senate, which is not the intent of the constitutional system.
Eventually, Prof, this will end up in the Supreme Court. But we know that the Supreme Court is also very careful before it intervenes in matters like this. What would trigger, because there's several petitions now pending before it, what would trigger the Supreme Court to finally say, we intervene here?
I think in the times when the court has stepped in very difficult political questions, it does so when there's a clear constitutional crisis or a threat of a constitutional crisis. I will echo what Ted said and say that we're not there yet. I don't think we're there. These are difficult questions, certainly difficult and even unnecessary, but it's not always a reason for the court to step in. And let me explain that briefly. We don't want the court to step in because we don't want the court to be an escape device for accountability, not for the vice president this time, but for the Senate and the House, whether they performed their job. It's very easy to blame another branch or a third branch to say that, oh, it was the Supreme Court that ordered us to continue, or it was the Supreme Court that ordered us to stop. But that's not how the design of the Constitution is. The design of the Constitution is that in impeachment contexts, the Senate is supreme in its field, the House is supreme in its tasks, and therefore they are accountable not just to the Constitution, they are accountable to the people themselves for performing that task correctly. So it's important to watch the events closely because there may be developments that will call for the intervention of the court, but I don't think given...
We're there yet.
Yeah, and it might not be the most practical avenue, even for those who want impeachment to push through.
Let's discuss this term, Attorney Tamase, sui generis. We've been throwing it around as if we understand the Latin meaning of it. But where are the limits? So when we say that each impeachment trial is different from all the other ones, meaning they all have their unique characteristics and, events surrounding the impeachment itself. In terms of sui generis, ano yung limit nun? Because it seems to be people can just say, oh, kasi sui generis, so we can do this.
Right. And sui generis should not be understood as a blanket permission to just do whatever, right? The main limit of sui generis is what the current laws provide. And the Constitution, again, provides for a clean process. House first, then Senate. No ping pong between the two branches. We do it sequentially, right? At the same time, the Senate provides for its own rules, and the rules don't provide for this ping pong. So the principal limit of sui generis is just, the text of these documents. The second limit would be, how do we read it according to constitutional principles and accountability? And I don't think it really, this passing the buck, essentially, doesn't further that.
This remanding to the House, I'm sure you lawyers and in the academe were seeing what scenarios could happen. Was this even something, could this have been hatched earlier by some people? Is it something that comes out of your sleeve in a moment of wanting to compromise? I mean, we're entering the realm of speculation here, Prof, but may we have your thoughts?
I know, right? And I think that was, let's assume, right, that the premise of that question is that they just decided this last night. If they did, it talks about the importance of looking at the consequences of the longer term consequences, right, of each action that this impeachment court does. It has very long downstream effects, basically, on what the process will be moving forward. It also is important to consider how the public will react, because and not particular parties or not particular partisans, but will it undermine the faith that the people have in general with the process and with the institutions running that process. And I think if they were trying to come up with a compromise, the cost of that, which is what we are suffering through now, might not have been worth it.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your analysis. Thank you so much, Professor, UP College of Law Assistant Professor Paulo Tamase.
All right, we're just going to take a quick break, but coming up, from the vice president to the former president, legal battles of the Dutertes could be mounting. The details of that when the big story returns. Stay with us.
You're watching The Big Story here on One News. Tensions ran high outside the Senate earlier today as pro-impeachment groups gathered demanding immediate action on the ouster case against Vice President Sara Duterte. Protesters banged on Senate gates, forcing security to close the gates and disperse the crowd. The organizers of the protest de-escalated the situation and held their program right at the gate. Present at the rally were Tindig Pilipinas co-convener Kiko Aquino D and ML Representative-elect Laila De Lima. They shared their frustrations over the current proceedings.
Sinabi ng isang kasama natin kagabi, sana po ulo na lang ni Bato yung pinapasa-pasa kasi yun talaga yung hugis bola. Hindi bola po ang impeachment, hindi bola po ang konstitusyon, hindi ito laro. Ginawa ng paraan ng Senado na patuloy pang i-delay yung pagdinig sa ebidensya, yung pagtanggap sa articles of impeachment. Kaya hindi talaga ito katanggap-tanggap.
Yung articles of impeachment po, yun na po yung certification. Hindi po yan itra-transmit ng House of Representatives sa Senado kung hindi sila naniniwala na ito ay sumunod sa mga requirements ng Constitution. Senator Bato, na isa siyang Senator Judge, para bang nagiging defense counsel na siya. Yung ilan din sa kanila, ganun din. Parang they're already representing the interests of the impeached official or the respondent. So, labag po yan sa konstitusyon.
Also today, the Office of the Vice President received the summons issued by the Senate Impeachment Court. In a short statement, the OVP confirmed it received the summons at around 11 this morning. Based on these summons, the Vice President must file her answer to the articles of impeachment within a non-extendable period of 10 days from the receipt of the summons. She is likewise ordered to appear before the Senate Impeachment Court at a date and time to be set by the presiding officer. Vice President Duterte is currently in a family trip to Malaysia. Meanwhile, the Vice President seems to be facing more legal battles. The House of Representatives has approved the report from the Committee on Good Government and Public Accountability, recommending the filing of cases against Duterte related to allegations of misuse of confidential funds. The committee recommended charging Duterte with technical malversation, perjury, bribery, and plunder. The committee likewise recommended filing criminal, civil, and administrative cases against other officials involved.
And still on the impeachment case of Vice President Sara Duterte, we will be hearing details of it from our next guest. He was recently appointed spokesperson of the impeachment court. Welcome to The Big Story, Attorney Reginald Tongol. Thank you for coming on the show.
Good evening to you, ladies.
We just spoke to a professor from the UP, and other legal luminaries have cited the dangerous precedent set by this remanding to the House of the impeachment, the articles of impeachment. Ano po ang sagot ninyo dito?
Well, the impeachment court is a body that is sui generis, as they have already exhaustively discussed. However, we are also a political body, which means that the court is not just run by legalistics or technicalities. It has to also be run by political intents, political motivations. And that is why the Constitution gave this power a textually demonstrable commitment to a certain branch of government, which is the Senate, to do this impeachment trial. So because of that, there are different views regarding why it shouldn't be too legalistic, and at the same time, on other aspects, we have to be legalistic. So while these views are listened to by each of the senator judges, I'm sure, because they are also listening to programs such as yours, they are taking this into consideration. However, they are only persuasive and not controlling on the impeachment court.
Attorney, I'm asking this because it somehow shields the person who is being accused, and in the future, pwedeng gamitin itong mga paraan na to delay the proceedings, because this is what's happening right now. That's why I'm saying it can be seen as a dangerous precedent.
I'm sure when the senator judges moved, for example, Senator Bato de la Rosa was the one who first moved for the dismissal of the case, and then it was seconded by Senator Judge Bongo, and then so as to prevent a stalemate and a never-ending debate in the floor, I think there was a concession made so that Senator Judge Cayetano was the one who vouched, or who actually told the court that Senator Bato might be open to amending his first motion. So all these debates, all the deliberations during the last night's proceeding is actually also considering all the precedents. However, in that particular question of whether or not to dismiss, there has no particular precedent that has been laid before by the two impeachment courts that happened in the past. So they are laying down the new precedent as a power that is vested in the Senate as an impeachment court.
Attorney, if you were to lay down in very simple terms that every Filipino could understand, what precedent is the Senate trying to lay here?
Okay, the Senate is laying or asserting its power to ensure that the House of Representatives actually has complied with the limitations set forth by Article 11, Section 5 of the Constitution, or Section 2, Number 5 of the Constitution. And because upon the manifestation of Senator Judge Cayetano, there were information about a certain discrepancies in the initiation of the complaint. So the court has to get what the official side of the House, and it can only take the form of either a certification or a resolution that is passed by the House. Because the impeachment court can only consider as controlling to them the evidence presented before it by both parties, or those things that they can take judicial notice of based on the rules on evidence. So there's no evidence presented yet about this, and they cannot take judicial notice because the conditions for taking judicial notice hasn't been complied with, because it is not a law. So that's why the court, I think, during the deliberations, you can look at the transcripts. That was the main consideration, how to get that assurance from the House that this verified complaint is actually compliant and did not
if I may interrupt you, attorney.
Yes.
This is a matter, legal luminaries have also said, that the accused should be the one to bring up before the impeachment court, not the judges themselves.
As I have been saying to earlier interviewers, what we got last night was a glimpse of how deliberations are done in a collegial judicial body. These are not usually seen by ordinary people, by the masses. However, if you have litigation practice, you will know that when you file a complaint anywhere, whether it's a prosecutor, if it's a criminal case or a civil case, the judge will have to determine first the sufficiency of that complaint. If there is any defect or there is any information that he wants to get from the party, then he can file a compliance so that the party will have to comply to establish the jurisdictional requirement, or at least make it to the mind of the court or the judge that this is actually something that is compliant with the requirements under the rules.
Pero
so that
attorney,
is what the court is doing.
Okay. Pero attorney, yung second item in that letter that Senate has transmitted to the House, getting a certification from the 20th Congress, isn't that clearly like pushing it away because wala pang 20th Congress and they're going to like form themselves on July 28 pa. So clearly, it seems, right, and I'm sure you can appreciate that, to everyone parang tinulak nila para at least hanggang July 28 wala pang magyayari. Because how can the 19th certify for the 20th?
Again, it's not a loss on any party because there has already been issuance of summons. So the time is already running as well for the defense. So it's running for the prosecution for them to comply, and it's running also for the defense for them to comply. Even without this order of the court yesterday, the timeline would still be the same. The impeachment court will be constituted today, and then the summons will be sent to the Vice President on Friday, and then count 10 days from Friday, that's around June 23 or 24, give or take 1 or 2 days, and then plus 5 days for the reply of the prosecutors. It will still have to effectively cross that 19th to the 20th.
Can VP
so
Sara
the
say...
timeline wasn't actually changed.
Can VP Sara say, why will I respond when you remanded the complaint back to the House? What am I responding to? She can say that,
again,
right?
Yes. It was clear from the deliberations last night that the complaint is not rendered rendered ineffective or useless. There was a concession made between the senator judges to put that very wording in the motion that it is not dismissed, the case is not dismissed, and at the same time, it does not, the jurisdiction of the court will not be terminated. So that is the concession, because this is a political process, says. It's not just about legalistics. We have to take into consideration the sui generis and the political process that is also at play behind the scenes. You are a very experienced journalist, and you already know how Congress or even senators
No, I don't.
give or take about.
I don't!
But Attorney Reggie, to says
We just need to explain to the public that these are the kind of concessions that even collegial bodies such as the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals are also doing amongst themselves, but they are not shown to the public because it is not as televised as the impeachment.
Okay, wait, I'll tweak Ces's question lang. Pagka kinwestiyon ni VP Sara, handa na ba sumagot ang mga senador nung kanyang defense team?
I think any litigator worth his salt will use whatever tools that they can use to file whatever remedy that they can file. So I think both the prosecution and the defense should be on their toes to do all these things. However, if they really want this process to already start, and then the trial will ensue already, then I think compliance is the easiest remedy for the House to do.
Okay, but attorney, a common sentiment or criticism right now from critics and legal luminaries is that the senators are acting like the lawyers of the Vice President, Sara Duterte. So it begs the question on whether can we expect the senator judges to be impartial in trying this impeachment case?
That is the very nature of this political process. Because since everybody is, the senator judges will only be run by their conscience when they decide to acquit or to convict. The opinions of the public are very much welcome. However, they are just that, opinions. It is not for the court to actually consider as a controlling ruling on the matter. So they can only consider evidence and jurisprudence or the rules that they have limited themselves to pass.
And attorney, earlier today, nagsalita na nga po ang prosecution panel. They held a press conference and Congresswoman Luistra was saying kahit sila they're confused with what the Senate is ordering. So have you received their request already for clarification? How soon will you be responding? And where do we go from here? Is this going to be a back and forth affair?
I think that motion for clarification that they were talking, they haven't really filed it as of this time. But we're expecting maybe anytime soon for both parties to file whatever pleadings that they want to file.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the big story. That was Attorney Reginald Tongol, spokesperson of the Impeachment Court.
Now on to another Duterte. The International Criminal Court has rejected the petition of former President Rodrigo Duterte to disqualify 2 judges from his case. The plenary was unanimous in junking Digong's motion to bar judges Rain Alapini Gansu and Maria Liera from ruling on the challenge to the court's jurisdiction over the case. Duterte is facing raps of crimes against humanity. As this developed, the Office of Public Counsel for Victims also confirmed it has urged the chamber to dismiss the former president's jurisdictional challenge. They insist Duterte's alleged crimes happened during the time the Philippines was still a member state of the ICC. They underscore the importance of making a stand that nations cannot just evade prosecution by deliberately withdrawing from the Rome Statute.
We're going to be pausing for another very quick break, but when we return, our economic managers are warning against Congress's proposal for a 100 or 200 peso across the board minimum wage hike for private workers. Their reason, when the big story returns, keep it here.
The big story is back with the Marcos administration's economic managers warning about the impact of the proposed legislated wage hikes. In a statement, the team notes that the 200 and 100 peso pay increases proposed by the House and Senate could trigger inflation by up to 2 percentage points. They warn that the poorest of the poor will bear the brunt of this, as any hike will result in higher prices of goods, among others. Now let's discuss this with Joshua Mata, Secretary General of Labor Group Sentro ng mga nagkakaisa at progresibong manggagawa. Magandang gabi po sa inyo. Welcome to the big story. Is there still hope that this wage bill will pass? It's been sidelined by the impeachment debate, but do you think there's still a chance?
Hi, Ces. Hi, Pauline, and hi, Shawn. To be honest, I think the wage increase bill is dead. Patay na po siya. Ang inihintay na lang po natin ay yung death certificate niya. Pag natapos po yung session ng House of Representatives natin today, sigurado ko po wala ho silang pag-uusapang wage.
Meron bang magagawa ang administration without a legislated wage hike to address this?
Wala po eh. Kasi kung ipapasa lang nila kami sa regional wage boards na siyang paulit-ulit ng sinasabi ng ating Pangulo at maging ng ating mga economic managers at kahit po ng labor secretary natin, lahat sila yan ang mensahe. Pero ang problema, in the first place, the reason why we went to the to the Congress to file a legislated wage increase is precisely after 36 years. Lahat po ng ating regional wage boards ay nag-fail sa kanilang mandate to provide the proper share ng fruits of labor na mamanggagawa sa kanilang trabaho. In fact, lahat ng minimum wage levels natin sa buong Pilipinas ay below the poverty threshold for a family of 5. That's precisely the reason why we went to Congress. At hindi ho ito basta-basta dinesisyonan. 2 taon po mahigit na pinagdidebatihan ito sa Senado at saka sa Kongreso. At lahat po ng mga arguments na naririnig natin ngayon, including those that were issued by our own by Malacanang's economic managers, or should I say economic mismanagers, the figures that they are now throwing around, these were all discussed, not the exact figures, but all the arguments they're using were already thoroughly debated sa House at saka sa Senate for more than 2 years. Ang nakakatawa nga po, meron silang bagong mga numbers na sinasabi at kinakouch pa nila sa mga pseudo-scientific na pag-aaral nila. Pero alam niyo po, sa buong 2 taon na pag-uusap namin sa Senado at saka sa Kongreso, hindi po lumalabas sa mga numbers na yan. Kaya halatang-halata, ni-rush nila yan at magandang tanungin natin sila at sabihin natin sila, hamunin po natin sila. Pakita nila yung model na ginamit nila. Because we did our own studies. And we have shown during the hearings na napaka-minimal ng impact nito kasi ang laki ng kinita naman ng mga kumpanya natin this past few years, if not decades. Kaya talagang napaka-dubious po ng paglabas ng position paper na yan na galing sa economic mismanagers natin.
Medyo kasi, Joshua, medyo kailangan din natin puntiryahin sino ba talaga yung apektado or makakapagbenepisyo dito sa mga legislated wage hike. Kasi ang understanding ko is hindi naman pala talagang lahat. Diba? It's only private, regular employees. Kumbaga, yung mga informal workers ay hindi makakapag-benefit. So, can you share with us ano yung numbers mo? Like how many people or employees or workers stand to benefit from this legislated across-the-board wage hike?
Let's clarify that, no? Ang hinihingi po, ang nasa batas po ay minimum wage increase. Hindi po siya across the board. Kaya mali ho si Cheese Escudero kahapon nung sinabi niya na yung nilabas nilang batas, apparently kahit nga si Cheese hindi niya na alam yung nilabas nilang batas kasi last year yon Hindi naman yun across the board. Yun ay minimum wage increase, which means only workers who are actually receiving the minimum wage are supposed to enjoy this. No, so that's about a bit. That's a little bit more about more 4 million na mga manggagawa. Pero the way we see it, pag binigyan po natin ng wage increase ang 4 million workers natin, not only do we lift them from out of poverty threshold, we would also be able to provide them with the powers to with the wherewithal to participate sa economy natin, which then primes the economy. Di ba ang ating economic growth naman all these years ay consumption juice? Bakit tayo natatakot na bigyan natin ng dagdag na sahod ang mga manggagawa when in fact ito ay tutulong lalo sa pag-ikot ng ating ekonomiya, which then creates growth that we all need. Kaya nakakalungkot lang po na yung marami sa mga arguments na binabato ng big business, no, sa totoo lang ay pananakot po yan.
Sino ba dapat sisihin? Nagpapogi lang ba ang House? By passing the 200 peso wage hike, tapos too late naman?
I'm so happy, Ces, you asked that question. Kasi talagang dapat linawin natin. Bukas nga mag-noise barrage na kami para magkaroon ng pangalawang indignation. So galing lang ako sa indignation rally kanina dahil pinapatay nga nila tong impeachment, no? Ngayon, pinaliwanag ko doon doon sa rally na habang nagdini-denounce natin ang pagpatay nila sa impeachment, actually pinapatay din nila yung wage bill today. No, at kaya bukas, yun naman ang aming indignation din. At doon gusto namin maging malinaw. Kung ang tanong ay sino ang pumatay nito, sa totoo lang po, si Cheese Escudero at saka si Martin Romualdez, sila po ay mga triggermen lang.
Sila ang dapat sisihin.
Sila ang mga triggermen.
Triggermen.
Sila ang nag-pull ng gun to kill the bill. Pero
I thought they were discussing important legislative matters. That's why hindi mabigyan ng atensyon tong impeachment.
Unfortunately, it's so clear that wage increase is not important for them. That's the reality. No, ang talagang mastermind dito, alam niyo po kung sino, ay wala pong iba kundi yung presidente po natin. Yan pong nilabas na economic team na yan. Yan na po yung justification, yan na po yung pagbuttress ng mga sinasabi ng presidente natin all this time. Hindi ho ba never naman siyang sumuporta dito eh. At alam niyo po ba, we actually received rumors, rumors we received rumors that the speaker himself was threatened na pwede siyang tanggalin sa posisyon niya pag pinabayaan niyang lumusot ito. Kaya namatay yung bill.
Rumor lang yon. Naku naman, mahirap yata.
Diyan nagsisimula.
Alam mo naman, yung mga rumor na yan, pwedeng maraming pinanggagalingang totoo yan, di ba? So,
alright.
No, but seriously.
Well, you have to start from scratch now, unfortunately, and 20th Congress. Joshua, we have some breaking news. So we do have to say thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us. That was Joshua Mata, Centro Secretary General.
All right, and our big picture for tonight comes in the form of a public service announcement, or it could be the other way around. But this is really important because the Makati Medical Center has flashed their red lights again Tuesday evening, June 10. That was last night. Now, this is the signal that MMC is calling on the public to donate blood. On its page, the hospital says, and we quote, "One donation can save up to 3 lives." Those who wish to donate may go directly to the hospital located on Amorsolo Street in Legazpi Village, Makati. You may also call 888-888-999 or email blood.bank@makatimed.net.ph. There, we're flashing the photo with the contact details on the screen. Now, do take note, MMC's blood bank is open Monday through Sunday from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m.
And before we end the show, this breaking news, as promised, the House of Representatives has adopted the motion to defer the acceptance of the articles of impeachment as remanded by the Senate. That's until the upper chamber responds to the House's request for clarification on why the documents are being returned to them. So again, another waiting game, and we will be listening once again to our legal luminaries to make us get sense of what's going on.
I know, but sometimes I have to admit that it just makes me more confused. All the possibilities. Right?
True. I think that's the motive. Confuse everyone. Yan lang.
Actually, smoke and mirrors, no?
Diba?
Well, it beats any teleserye right now, any movie, right? So everyone's glued to their screens every day. But for tonight, that's it for The Big Story. Thank you so much for watching.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
We'll be back as usual tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. We'll see you then. Have a good night, everyone.